Hi, so today I'm going to be doing another Corner Booth episode. This one is going to be an interview with Darrel Van Citters. Hi, my name is Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist in the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years now. The Corner Booth, as you may know, is a podcast that we used to record with Larry Whitaker and Chance Raspberry, and Chance kind of stepped away from the show after a while, but in this particular show Chance was actually in on the recording, and we're talking to Darrel Van Citters, who has a book called The Art of J. Ward, and so we spoke to him about the book, but there's also, like, he's had a history at Disney, and there's a whole lot of animation history talk in this episode, and a lot of the things that he said I followed up on some questions specifically about working at the Disney studio. There was a specific era around the time Fox and the Hound and Black Cauldron that was a big moment in animation history, because some of the best some of the animators that are famous now, Tim Burton, Brad Bird, people like this who were working at the time there and weren't given the light of day because of the politics and the way Disney produced work there. So it's really interesting to hear Jay's commentary and experience having worked there, because he worked there at that time. So you get to hear some of those stories, and it's fascinating. And he also, I asked him about recommending to aspiring animators what would be now in this modern culture of animation culture, what he would recommend animators study. So without any further ado, and that's enough from me, let's go to the Corner Booth and listen to the conversation with Darrel Van Citters.
What's up, guys? This is Chance Raspberry here, coming at you live, and welcome back to the Corner Booth. We are here today to bring you an exclusive podcast once again, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. That would be me. I am here to tell you guys about some really cool stuff I'm working on. If you want to check it out, it's at chanceraspberry.com. And the main project is my original 80s nostalgia animated series, kickstarted on Kickstarter.com, officially successful. You can check it out at littlebilly.com, because that's the name of it, Little Billy. And so Chance Raspberry Productions and Little Billy is sponsoring today's episode of the Corner Booth. Thank you. And the letter A, animation.
No, we're not. Since we're kind of doing the sponsor thing, we're not supposed to mention anything else we're doing, right?
What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, like, I'm not going to mention GhostStreamPictures.com or Ghost Stream Pictures on Facebook, right?
Yeah, not
okay.
Today.
I just want to be sure.
Not this time. Not in this episode.
Shameless plug.
We are here today with
I'm going to let you do that, my friend.
Darrel Van Citters, ultra mega popular, rich, famous director.
Well, you forgot handsome.
And handsome, all things animated.
Jet-setting playboy, world-renowned chef.
So I thought we'd start at the beginning. When you took your first steps...
I
First
do
of all,
remember that.
What was your escape from the womb like? I think everybody wants to know about that.
You didn't let me finish.
I'm sorry.
When you took your first steps into CalArts, what was school like?
Was school like at CalArts?
Yeah, I went there too, so.
Yes. A lot of people did.
Yeah.
It's a great school. For character animation, anyway.
Yeah. What are you saying?
Uh-oh, read into it what you will. Yeah, we were there the first year of the CalArts character animation program in 1975. And it was kind of amazing to find. We were living in a world where nobody knew anything about animation at the time, and we didn't know anybody else who knew anything about animation. For a group of us to get together and find similar souls was kind of amazing.
So it kind of that was just at the transition from Chenard into the official CalArts name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the animation industry looked pretty moribund at the time. It was not a great time to get into the business, but things eventually turned around.
So you threw caution to the wind and said,
Yeah,
"Screw it, I'm going to do this anyway."
I'm going to do it anyway, no matter how little it pays.
I'll show them.
So I could pick up the tab today. Like,
Thanks, Larry.
The great thing
not
is,
you. You're sponsoring the show,
Right?
In fact, since you're sponsoring the show, shouldn't you pick the tab up?
That's right.
All paid advertising is not negotiable.
So you started at CalArts, and I mean, when in your life, when did you decide you wanted to get into film?
I decided right out of high school that I was
Yeah.
interested in animation. And fortunately, at the same time, we're starting up the Disney program there. And I had 1 year of college back in New Mexico, and then I moved out here to start the program.
Yeah.
So
So
there was a heavy load in that program, too. There was Brad Bird, John Musker, Jerry Reese,
Wow.
John Lasseter. It was
Chris Buck.
Chris Buck was in the next
next.
class with Mike Giamo and Tim Burton.
Yeah. So who were your instructors? Do you remember?
I do remember, yes. We had Jack Hanna, who was a former
Wow.
Disney director.
Donald Duck director.
Donald Duck director ran the program and ran the animation class. And then we had Bill Moore from Chenard, the legendary design teacher. We had Elmer Plummer, who had worked at Disney on Fantasia and was part of the California watercolor movement. He did our life drawing. We later had T. He.
I have a triangle of his.
Of T's.
When he was coming down to the end of it, he was giving away all of his stuff, and he brought a big box of his art supplies to CalArts, and I grabbed up, and it's got everything he had was labeled
T. He. Oh, that's great. And then we had Ken O'Connor teaching us layout. So we had a lot of Disney veterans there teaching us.
Wow.
Cool.
And what made you want to get into the madness that is the animation industry?
Well, at the time I didn't realize it was mad.
Ignorance is a bliss, you know.
It was. It was. I just like cartoons, and I was kind of stunned that you could actually do that for a living. Although some would still argue that maybe that's not the case.
Roast beef,
Right here.
and I'll be right back with the other two. Do you want horseradish with that?
No, I'm good.
That soup is amazing.
Not good.
I'm gonna have to get like the name and all the info.
Mulligatawny. Well, we have it every day.
Okay, cool.
We have kakaliki every day, and then we switch off on the third soup. But some people, you put it on their mashed potatoes for the gravy. They're like, can I have that curry gravy?
Are we going to
It's
edit this out?
amazing. It's totally amazing. No, you know what, you guys? We are at Buchanan Arms on Burbank Boulevard, and you gotta come in here and try the soup. It's rad. Curry
Which one?
mulligatawny.
Mulligatawny. Well, I'm having the
Mulligatawny.
roast beef, and I had it last time. It's good. So,
Cool.
Darrell, how's the salad?
Excellent.
Might as well plug the place.
Yeah, no, if you're ever in Burbank and you're, in a good Scottish pub, just come check it out.
Okay, I've got roast beef now, so Chance or Louise take over the interview.
He's like, we won't hear from Larry for a while, so yeah, you didn't know it was mad at the time,
Right.
and you just loved to draw since you were a kid, or
Since
thank you, no worries.
since high school, I think I really got into it.
Vinegar's on the table.
Okay, thanks.
That's a big piece of fish.
It is a big piece
Wow.
of fish. I'm glad I didn't get the double.
Yeah. That's why she asked you if you wanted to get how hungry you were.
So, did you go to CalArts for the full term for 4 years, or?
I'd had a year of college.
Yeah.
So, I actually went for 3 years. The first year of college counted towards my credit, so I was technically the first graduate from that program because I got out in 3
Wow.
instead of 4.
And after you left, did you bus tables, or?
After I left, during school I worked at the usual places. I spent a summer as a gopher at Chuck Jones, and then the following summer I spent working at Filmation, learning what real animation is like.
So wait. The usual places as in what you said while you were working at this while you were going to school.
I would take summer jobs.
So is that was normal? Just going to the studios and taking jobs at the
No,
studios
it wasn't
while
normal.
you were
No, it wasn't
going to
normal,
school?
but the normal places. There was there wasn't many places doing
Oh,
animation.
okay. So that's
You
what you meant
work
by
as a-
normal places.
Yeah, you work in a commercial studio if you could get freelance.
Right, I
Or it was
see.
Filmation or Hanna-Barbera. And so yeah, I did ran errands for Chuck Jones the first year, and then I worked at Filmation, and learned about TV animation and how much I really didn't want to
Wow,
work
that
in
is,
one of those
TV
places.
animation is rough.
Well, in those days it was rough. It got much better, and it is much better today,
Yeah.
but at the time it was pretty dreadful.
Oh yeah.
And then I went straight out of there to Disney. Straight out of CalArts to Disney.
So what was your first job at Disney?
Being an assistant animator on Fox and the Hound.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So were you in between hair for Glenn on the Grizzly, or? I know who did that, so I'm
Yes,
just,
yes.
I'm yanking your chain.
Yeah. No, we
Bradford. Okay, so,
we worked on whatever was handed down, and then of course we got a chance to animate a little bit as animating assistants, which was a kind of a pseudo category, so they could get animation for less money.
Disney would actually hire people for less money by creating new categories? Well, it's a good thing nothing like that ever happens today in the world.
That's right.
Yeah. Just listen to the Burt Klein interview, and then you'll find out how that doesn't happen. Yeah, and by the way, that Burt Klein interview is show 10.
It's a good interview.
So you worked on Fox and the Hound, and you stuck around.
After that, yeah, I ended up getting credit as an animator on that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right out of school?
Well, not right out. It was a couple years on it. But yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it was like your first job at Disney was Fox and the Hound, and then you got credited.
Yeah, we had to turn out a certain amount of footage to get credit. You had to put in at least 90 feet in order to get credit.
Okay.
So, and then after that, they were starting Black Cauldron. I didn't really enjoy. Well, let's put it this way: anybody who was outspoken about animation at that time period at Disney usually didn't last long in production.
Oh no.
I was, we'll say, as an animator, I was outspoken enough where I was demoted to, at the time it was considered a demotion to doing cleanups on animation. And then I was rescued from doing that by Tad Stones, who was working on some TV specials for Epcot, which was going to open soon. And so we were supposed to do the animated gags in between the serious live action stuff. And while we were doing that, they canceled the shows.
Dag nabbit.
So we stuck with the animation, and we actually convinced Tom Wilhite to put it together as a short. So we came up with a strange interstitial, which was to go film the Mr. Lincoln, the naked Mr. Lincoln head at Maypo, which was what that part of it, what Imagineering was called in those days. And we filmed it lip syncing to the track that we'd recorded, and we used him as the MC, and then we tied together all these strange little bits of animation.
What's it called, Mr. Tomorrow or something like
Fun
that?
with Mr. Future.
Mr. Future, that's
Probably
right.
the most obscure cartoon
Really?
in the last half of the 20th century.
Wow.
I'm sure it can't be found online though, right?
Who knows? I know Disney won't let it out, but
Really?
yeah.
Why?
I think it was, at the time it was a little too weird for him. Now nobody knows about it, so there's no interest in it. But at the time it was. I remember thanking everybody who had a crew screening in the theater at Disney. I remember being up front and thanking everybody for making this much more than just a pile of cells. And Joe Hale, who was producing Black Cauldron at the time, walked out afterwards and said he should have left it as a pile of cells.
Wow.
So that's how well thought of the younger generation was at that time.
And where is he today?
He's retired.
That's so mean.
Wow.
Right. No holding back on that one.
No, I think that was unexpurgated. Yes.
So, after working at Disney, what did you decide to do next? Did you want to go on at Disney? Did you make a conscious effort to find another place to go? Did you have other dreams and aspirations?
Well, after I finished filming with Mr. Future, I got involved with Mark Sturdivant, who had just, in the studio, just optioned a property called Who Censored Roger Rabbit.
I've heard of that.
So we spent, yes, it was changed to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and we spent several years
I actually
developing.
read the novel.
Yeah.
It's very different.
It is very different. I love the original cover for the book, too. It had this big, giant, stuffed rabbit, the kind that you win at a World's Fair or something like that, or a carnival or something like that.
I remember in the book when they would talk, their words would turn into word balloons.
Yeah, the whole thing was predicated on comic books,
Yeah.
on comic strips,
Instead of
not on
animation.
animation.
Oh,
So we changed it over to animation. We had a whole different approach to it. Developed it for a number of years. And the studio wouldn't pay the money that it would cost. At the time, the features they were making there were around $6 or $7 million. This, at the time, was budgeted around $12 million, which was too much for them to bear. So it just kind of sat in development hell for a number of years.
wow.
And when the studio went into play, and Ron Miller was booted out, and everybody else was brought in, Spielberg expressed interest in it, and we had at one time approached Bob Zemeckis about directing it, but that didn't go anywhere. In fact, we never did find a director for it, but we had original writers, were Seaman and Price, who ended up writing the final version, but we also brought in Lowell Gans and Bob Lou Mandel, who had just come off of Night Shift and Splash to write it. We thought they did a great
I
script
love
on
Night
it.
Shift.
That's hilarious.
I love that movie.
Michael Keaton is hysterical.
Yeah.
So we had it developed, and it just wasn't going anywhere. Spielberg got involved, brought in Zemeckis. Zemeckis wanted to do it a certain way, and it was not reflective of the way we were doing. I have to say, I think we were more interested in the personality of the character and what this cartoon character was really like behind the scenes. This guy who was a clown on screen, what he was like behind the scenes. And it became more about the gimmick of combining animation with live action. And certainly one of the more shrill cartoon voices I think you could have picked for the character. We actually had Paul Rubens on board. He was kind of going to do a.
I've seen the test.
Test.
I remember
You can
him
see it
doing
on
the
YouTube.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah, that was animated by Chris Buck.
Yeah.
It was great voice, great test. But
It was with
Is
Addie
that out
Valiant
there
too.
online anywhere? Because
Yeah,
I'd
you
love
can-
to see that.
you can see it online. It's
Nice.
on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, somehow the stuff. I don't know how the stuff gets out there. The stuff sneaks out
CalArts,
there.
I'm sure, had nothing to do with that.
So yeah. So when that didn't go, I'd also been working on a featurette. It was featuring Sport Goofy at the time. Basically, the whole reason for doing that was to pioneer cheaper and off-site, lower overhead production. So we set up off the lot. We're here in Burbank at an office building, and we went from using Disney pegs to Acme pegs, which were more standard. So you can use more freelancers. We went to using from Disney paint to cartoon color paint. A lot of things which
I see what you're saying.
yeah, which were just common sense as
Right.
ways to cut costs.
Because Disney had their own chemical compounds and recipes and all that. And
Everything-
Cartoon color was standard for the rest of the industry.
Exactly, and Disney had their own set of pegs, and everybody else was using the other kind of pegs. So
Right.
it was a more common sense approach to production to kind of increase the reach of Disney
Right.
without spending more money.
Right.
And that closed down when I left, and basically. I didn't necessarily have other aspirations at the time, but Disney didn't have aspirations to keep me. We didn't have a meeting of the minds, as they say. And so I was released on my own, and
And the rest is history.
something like that. So then I went freelance for a long time. I was doing things like timing shoots and animating on commercials, and I animated a lot of commercials for Warner Brothers Animation. And they asked me to come in-house after that and be their creative director for their classics unit. So I spent 3 years doing that.
That's when you did Box Office Bunny.
Box Office Bunny, then in the first Nike spot with Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny.
Oh, cool.
And after having done that, I wasn't really, again, I wasn't crazy about a corporate environment because I saw just how slow things move. I mean, I knew that at Disney, and I thought maybe it would be different there, but things were still fairly slowly paced at Warner Brothers. So I suggested, why don't we why don't we expand our commercials division at Warner Brothers from just doing licensed product spots with the Warner characters to a bigger thing. Let's just take on all commercials. Let's just do all animated commercials and just create this as a money-making division for Warner Brothers. And I didn't realize at the time, but licensing basically ran the animation division.
Yep.
So they're not too happy about doing anything that doesn't have licensed product. So that didn't go anywhere either. But I said, after working 6 months on this business plan at night, I thought maybe there's something to be had here. So we went outside and started Renegade Animation. Renegade's been in business for 22 years now. So
Wow.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was. Nothing ever quite goes the way you think it's going to go, as you well know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's no small feat.
No.
Well, I remember when I started my first studio, Cornerstone. I called up Ray Patterson, who was the last living Tom and Jerry animator. He was a cell washer on silent film, put it that way, in high school. And then he worked at Disney on some Pluto cartoons and a couple of shots in Fantasia, did the clowns in Dumbo.
Yes, those are some of the best.
Along with Grant Simmons too, right?
Yeah. And his brother did Monster of the Whale in Pinocchio. So I called up Ray and I called up Ray and I'm thinking of doing this. He goes, "Oh yeah, absolutely. You know why I started a studio, Larry?" "No, why, Ray?" "Because there wasn't any work." I was
So if I'm going to be unemployed, I might as well be unemployed for myself.
And then I called Dale up and I said, "Dale Barry, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think it's crazy?" He said, "Yes."
Because Dale had his own place too.
Yep. But he said, "But I think you can do it." So I did it. But I wasn't as successful as Darrel Van Citters.
How long did your place last?
4.5 years.
No, it's amazing. Any business can last. It's not
But
easy.
4.5 years, most studios close within 6 months.
Yeah.
So I can still consider that.
That's a success,
successful.
absolutely.
Yeah, full on, man.
In fact, there was this project we did that we were bidding on against someone else called Larry Boy the Cartoon Adventures. Darrell didn't get it. So anyway.
No, we didn't.
I was always wondering, why we started getting a bad reputation in the business, Darrell. What was that all about? No, I'm kidding. So, having had your own studio, I'm sure you've been dying to get back into the big studios now, right?
Absolutely. Nothing attracts me more.
So not that we won't come back to this, but I want to jump forward and talk about your most recent, more personal project, which is your book.
The Art of J. Ward Productions.
Yes. Who's Jay Ward, for those of us who don't know?
Well, that's one of the first questions I ask when I do presentations around town. How many people here know who Jay Ward is? And I'll get a smattering of hands, and they say, okay, how many people here know who Rocky and Bulwinkle are? And that gets the proper reaction. So Jay Ward was the TV animation studio that did Rocky and Bullwinkle, Dudley Do-Right, George of the Jungle, Super Chicken, all the Captain Crunch commercials for about 25 years. And
Did they do Underdog?
Sure, and Mr. Peabody and Sherman, for which there's going to be a soon-to-be-released DreamWorks feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was watching the trailer last night.
Yes.
It looks cute.
Yeah, they're promoting the heck out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. They own the rights now. They bought Classic Media,
They don't actually own the
right?
rights.
Oh, are they licensing it?
Classic Media had a licensing agreement with the Jay Ward family.
Oh, I gotcha.
And it was called Bullwinkle Studios. So when DreamWorks picked up DreamWorks Classics, they picked up that agreement. But they don't
Gotcha.
actually own the Ward properties.
But they own currently the rights. I'm assuming that there's probably be new negotiations. I would not be surprised if they don't take full advantage of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Oh, I'd be shocked if they didn't too.
Yeah.
I'm sure that all that's in the works.
Well, if they hurry, they might still get the original Rocky to voice it.
You better run fast, yeah.
I was in the booth with June once. She's hilarious.
Great.
Does anybody know what her real birthday is, by the way?
Well, supposedly she's 96.
Wow.
She's been to a few of the book signings too.
Yeah?
Yep. Which is kind of
We're
amazing.
talking about June Foray, by the way, folks.
The voice of Rocky, the voice of Natasha,
Witch Hazel,
Witch Hazel.
both the Disney version and the more famous
Chuck
Warner
Jones
Brothers
version. Yep.
And a bazillion other voices. And
Yes.
Great. You know what? Can I keep this roll?
So what goes into
Thank you.
doing an art book like that? There's got to be a lot of research and history and calling up friends.
What's the book? What's the book about? First of all, before we even get into the research.
Well, the book is about the artwork that was done at J. Ward Productions. For those who don't know, all the early J. Ward Productions were sent to Mexico City to be animated.
Really?
Yes, that was they're trying to
From the beginning.
from the beginning.
Wow. Okay.
General Mills wanted to do cheap production, and they thought by sending it first they were going to send it to Japan. That didn't work out. So they've had somebody who knew somebody in Mexico City, so they thought we'd send it down there, where we can get animation done for cents on the dollar. And they didn't realize how ridiculously low they were budgeting it. In fact, their budget was about half of what Hanna-Barbera was getting at the time. And Hanna-Barbera, when they were doing Rough and Ready, were not getting a lot of money then either. So it was an absurdly low budget. And they found out afterwards, when they started adding up all the retakes and all of the mess-ups and the fact that you had an inexperienced crew starting from a standing stop, that they probably could have done it for the same price or cheaper here
Amen, brother.
in America. Wow.
Let that be a lesson to the rest of us.
Did Quist and Quake make it in there too?
And where?
Were they J. Ward characters?
Yeah, they were J. Ward too.
Yeah. In your book, I mean.
Yes, that's another story. So a lot of the artwork that you see on screen was not very good. It was kind of awful, to say the least. And lots of technical mistakes, poorly drawn, just constant mistakes on screen. And very poor execution in general. And for me, that's all I ever thought about it. You know, they were the funniest cartoons on TV. They were certainly the wittiest. But I never gave a thought to the drawings or the animation style, because we all knew it was not very good. But it still didn't seem to matter because the entertainment value was there.
Right.
But then when I did my first book, which is on the making of Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, I discovered there was a lot of crossover between the TV UPA studio, even the regular UPA studio, and J. Ward. And one of the people that worked both on Christmas Carol and at J. Ward was Shirley Sylvie. And Shirley was a board artist. She boarded on Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, and she also did layout, and she laid out a chunk of that picture. And she also, of course, worked at J. Ward, doing copious amounts of storyboards.
She was doing a lot of the background designs then, the layout designs.
Yeah, exactly. And character designs occasionally, too.
I only mention that because from time to time when we use industry lingo,
People get lost.
I don't know if the other person on the other end listening to this podcast knows what we're talking about.
Yes, well, layout means the background layouts and the character layouts within there, so that you know where to position the characters when you animate them. Right. And the background painter needs to know what to paint. So the layout person is very important. They take the storyboard and convert it to production methodology. And so Shirley Sylvie had done all this great artwork, and I'd always loved her work over the years, but I didn't know it was her until I started doing research on the Magoo book. And unfortunately, she died around 2010, I believe it was. It was 11. Might have been 2011. And so I offered to help her daughter go through a lot of stuff that was left. She had like several dozen boxes out in the garage, and they had just been sitting out there for decades and getting not well treated by weather and heat and things like that. And they had to throw out a number of boxes at one time.
Oh no.
But they still had enough that filled 3 giant plastic bins. And so I got the bins from her, and I went through all of the artwork. And there's a lot of photocopies in there, but there's a lot of drawings too. And when I started looking at all the drawings and the artwork, I realized this is way, way better than what I was seeing on the screen. What happened here?
I have to find out and tell the story.
Yeah, I got to find out what more about this. And so I talked to the head of classic media who had loved my Mr. Magoo book, and I said, "Does this look like a project you might be interested in letting me do?" You know, and he said, "Absolutely, go do it." So I got permission from him and from Tiffany Ward, who runs the Ward Enterprises, and said, "Okay, I'd like to do this book," which basically means it's on my dime to do it. Right. It's all up to my efforts and everything else. So I started doing a lot of digging, and one of the first places, besides having all of that great stuff from Shirley's estate, which I had scanned, I went down to Tiffany's office and started looking through the files there. And at first, it didn't look like it was going to be very productive because they were all 8.5 by 11 files, and it looked like it was scripts and photocopies. So I didn't think there was going to be a lot there, which was a little discouraging at front. But the second time I went, I did a deeper dive into the files, and I discovered that there's a lot of drawings that have been done on animation paper, and the animation paper had been folded in half and left deep inside the folder. So you have to dig through all these scripts and photocopies, and there's some drawings.
You know, it's funny you say that because I would have never thought. It's logical. I would have never thought of it. Someone who got me for some of the TV productions we did at my studio, the person who got me to punch 8.5 by 11 animation grade, the good stuff, the feature stuff, paper, and do the shows on that was Dan Haskett. He goes, "Why don't you just animate it on 8.5 by 11 and punch it?"
Because it's smaller and cheaper.
I never thought about that. And you can feed it through a scanner. I never, duh.
So you just got unpunched 8.5 by 11 Ingram.
Yep.
And then just punched it yourself.
Or we had them punch it. Yep.
That's
and
awesome.
it was cheaper because the paper wasn't as, because it was a smaller.
It was a normal size.
Yeah, standard size. So because the paper's expensive, and then on top of that, it was all standardized.
And when you scan it at high res, it doesn't matter anyway.
Nope. And we vectored everything anyway. So by the time we finished it.
So real quick, sorry, just on that note. Since you had to deviate from the topic, no, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
I'm glad you did, though, because now you've created a tangent here that I'm interested in too. It's like, where do you go to get paper like that? Can you still do it?
Is it Lightfoot Animation? I think online, or you can go to Cartoon Color and get Ingram.
Because I knew about Cartoon Color, but I wasn't sure. I know that.
I think it's Lightfoot. Yeah, I'll have to look online, but I think it's Lightfoot Animation. Okay. That's where I would get it from.
Cool, man.
And I get 8.5 by 11.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Sorry. When you said that, I thought that was interesting because as soon as you said, it was 8.5 by 11 folders, you never find animation in there, and I mean, wait a minute.
You do at your place. Yeah, so when I did a deeper dive, I found all of this stuff that had been folded over and had been sitting in files for 50-some years. And wow! But there's no actual animation art archive anywhere. So there's no production work, but there's all the pre-pro work. You find model sheets and storyboards, stuff like that.
So does all that artwork that you have in the book have a crease in the middle of it?
An awful lot of it does, yes.
Which you guys didn't remove with Photoshop or anything. You
well, if you scan it right, most of the creases disappeared, but there'd be paper shadings and stuff like that to show up, and rubber cement stains and all that stuff. That's all in there.
See, I think it's cool when that stuff gets left in because it's like, no, this is it. You're seeing the actual
the way
real
it looks
thing.
now.
Yeah.
So that turned out well. I got an awful lot from those archives, and it was a lot of scanning. And then there was some people locally who had some stuff. Jay Ward art is very hard to come by. There was a few people who had some of the later stuff, like George of the Jungle and Super Chicken. And then, strangely enough, through Mike Van Eaton, I was introduced to a woman out of Wisconsin who had several boxes of artwork that came back from Mexico. From one of the expatriates who'd gone down there to work on the show. He brought back his model sheets and storyboards. And so I used some of that stuff in there. What was fascinating about that stuff was the model sheets were in Spanish. Because they had to be done that way down there.
That's excellent, man.
Yeah. So,
So how do you say Rocky and Bulwinkle in Spanish?
I did know Bullwinkle in Spanish because I have an article where they mention that, but I can't remember what it was called now. But it was kind of amazing to stumble on all this stuff, and just one thing led to another, and the artwork came out of the woodwork.
And I'm glad you brought up Van Eaton Galleries too, because I was going to ask you if you had checked, if you had talked to them about that, because they had so many things that I was just going like, man, you guys have so much stuff that either I didn't even know about to begin with, or that I had completely forgotten about, and it's like, oh yeah, this thing slipped through the cracks, but you've got yet hundreds of drawings from this production.
Yes,
you got a
exactly.
ton of good stuff there.
No, one of the first places I hit was all of the animation dealers across the country, because you never know, even if they don't have something, maybe they know a collector who specializes in that, and they might have something.
Right, or maybe they sold it to someone, and they're like, oh, we still have their contact info.
Exactly. That didn't pan out too well, but it was worth an effort.
Cool.
That's how rare the Jay Ward stuff was?
Well, because for the first 5 years, all the production was sent down to Mexico.
Right.
So anything that was down there is pretty much gone. I still believe that there's some down there because years ago they used to say Warner Brothers artwork was all burned up and destroyed, but there's a ton of it out there. So I think there's still a lot down there. but not being fluent in Spanish and not knowing where to go hit.
Yeah, where to even start looking.
I did place an ad on Craigslist in Mexico City, thinking that that was an outside chance, and it didn't pan out either.
Yeah.
But I tried everything. So yeah,
It's amazing where animation artwork will like just randomly show up. A friend of mine, Ron Barbagallo, does restoration of cells and that kind of stuff. And he said it's strange how things show up because that stuff is just given away and cut down. You find cells that are cut to fit frames.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fascinating though, because it's like you were like the J. Ward animation Indiana Jones looking for.
I tell people that when I started the book, I didn't have any artwork. By the time I got it to the printer, I had 5,000 scans.
Wow.
So it did show up, but it took a long time to get it. And then once you find it, you have to figure out what it's from and then who did it. Because I believe strongly that the artist need to be identified. And in fact, there's one whole chapter in the book that's just about the artists, the original crew, and what they did and who they were.
Including Mexican artists too?
I deal with that in a later section.
Yeah.
I deal with some of those Mexican artists and some of the American expats that went down there to work on the show.
That's great, man.
Yeah. 'Cause I
As
think
much credit as possible.
Well, I think so, because too often animation artists are just kind of overlooked. And I thought that was a key part of what this book was about, was to highlight the artist, not just the art, but the artists too, because nobody knows anything about these people.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah, seriously. That's great, man. And is the book out now? Is it officially released?
And the book came out in November of last year.
Cool.
And has been selling very, very well. And I've also been making presentations and book signings and stuff like that. Because this book is independently published. I did it myself. I put up the money.
Wow.
I did the whole thing.
Wow. And so are you like raking in all the profit, or how does that work?
I'm raking in the costs right now.
Okay. You're making eat back what you spent on it. Yeah.
Yes, I hope at some point it becomes profitable, but yeah. I mean,
Well, let's hope it breaks even at least.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It sounds like it's going to, man. I mean, it's such a cool project.
I hope it will. I think when a lot of people know about it, I mean, I haven't had anybody.
I'm
who
sure
hasn't
that a
enjoyed the
feature
book.
film that would have a couple of J. Ward characters in it wouldn't hurt. Maybe
Exactly.
something like that'll come out soon.
You never know.
I don't know.
Well, it was no accident either, the way it was timed. I mean, I knew the film was coming.
That's shameless.
Welcome aboard.
That's awesome also.
How dare you try to make money?
How dare you try to do exactly what we've done on every podcast? That's great.
Well, that was also part of the problem, though, is because the release date kept changing. And I also knew that I had to hit that release date in order to draft on that publicity. So it required me working faster than normal to get the book done. And that was a lot of digging and a lot of research and a lot of writing at night and on weekends. But it was 18 months of steady work.
Did any typos end up in print?
Oh, there's a couple, but man, I went through that thing so many times, and a lot of other people did. But it's inevitable. There's no book in the world that doesn't have typos in it. It's just impossible to get them all out. But yeah, it was a fun project. I'm glad I did it. I hope people will go out and buy the book at artofjward.com.
All right, there you go, right?
Finally.
Would you like some more?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, yours has no straw.
Heck yeah. So
That's
art
because
of
you ate your straw.
Did you do any drawings for the book?
I did not.
Oh,
So I just focused on the
just
artist
won
themselves.
one.
maybe he'll draw something in the inside cover, sign it, and
Give it to me.
us.
You can have page 302.
Yay.
I'm afraid I did not learn how to draw the characters, even though I have lots of model sheets in there.
I'm sure it would take hours of effort. Oh wait, that's too fluid.
Yeah. Well, some of the drawings, if you see them, you'd be impressed at just how solid they are and how badly damaged they got down in Mexico.
So is the book available anywhere besides your personal website? Is it up on Amazon and other bookstores?
Amazon is the only national distributor of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody want dessert or anything else?
Just more water.
Okay.
On my last book, I'd actually gotten it picked up by one of the two distributors in America for books. And
And what was the last book?
The Making of Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, which is now out of print. I had two print runs on that, total of 2,500 copies. That's out of print now, but I still do offer on my website a limited edition of the 50th anniversary commemorative edition of Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol, because I had enough people wanted it, and it was the 50th anniversary. It's limited to 250 copies. And it has another 200 more illustrations in it than the original edition did.
Wow, cool.
Again, things show up once the book is done. Stuff comes out of the woodwork. So I had experience with the national distributor and how the book business works. And for those of you who've never done a book, the way the system is set up, and it goes back to the Depression, any book that is shipped to any retailer can be returned at any time for any reason. It could be because it didn't sell, or it could be because somebody kicked the hell out of it and ripped the cover somewhere along the pipeline. Now, none of them were destroyed when I sent them out, but I would get cartons of books back that had been beat up.
And were these like bulk shipments that were coming to the? Thank you so much. Were these like bulk shipments that were coming to the distributors, or that were actually that you had mailed out that got returned to you because they were damaged in?
They were not damaged from my end.
Okay.
Once they sent them out to the retail locations, they would get destroyed. Those people had the right to send it back to the distributor, and the distributor sent it back to me. So,
Do you have insurance for that, or do you just have to eat it?
you have to eat it. So what you lose is you lose the price of shipping the books the first time. You lose the price of the book itself because now it's unsellable, and you pay the price for shipping it back to you. So it's a real lose-lose-lose situation.
Oh my gosh, man! And you can't just say like, if this happens, just don't send them back to me. Just like I don't want to know about it, because then at least you would save money on the not having to pay the shipping.
But at the same time, I mean, it was all my money that
Right.
went into that.
It's like I get it. You totally want to save the money, but you also want to know if you're missing.
How many copies were destroyed? Yeah.
Totally.
So after having experienced that, I decided I didn't want to do that again, because I didn't think that was right. My experience with Amazon had been pleasant. Out of 2,500 copies, now they didn't sell all those 2,500, but out of the hundreds that they did sell, I had 3 copies returned.
Wow.
Okay.
That's good.
So, I mean, it's not hard to figure out which place you want to do business with, is it?
Right.
So Amazon is doing the national distribution on this. I don't like to sell through them because all retailers or distributors take 55% off the top. By the time I ship the book to Amazon, I'm barely making any money on the book. It's almost a cost by the time it goes through Amazon. Buy it through my website, it's cheaper, and I make more money.
Yeah.
So it's better
Don't go to Amazon to buy the book.
Thank you.
Go
Ray.
right to Darrell.
And maybe he'll sign it for you.
Oh, absolutely. If you buy it from my website, it comes signed.
See, there you go.
And that website again?
artofjward.com.
Artofjward.com.
Yeah, we'll have a link in the show notes at cornerbooth.net.
So
Cornerbooth.net.
Any other books planned, or
at this point, no.
no?
That was a hard job to pull off in a short amount of time.
No, you're not going to do the story of Fun with Mr. Future or anything like that?
Well, people have suggested other books. One of them was Making of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which would be a fun book. But you got to get a lot of legal issues lined up on that. You got to get the Seuss estate, you got to get Warner Brothers because they now own it, and you got to get Chuck Jones' estate. So you got to get a lot of people. I think I could probably get 2 of the 3, but I'm not sure I want to go into battle over the last one. So that's one that's been
Maybe
mentioned.
we should interview Phil now, Phil Roman.
Phil Roman, Don Morgan. There's a few left in June.
Cindy Lou Who.
Another one that was suggested was a book on the MGM Cartoon Studio.
Oh, wow.
I've got that big Tom and Jerry one. I love that book.
Because it really needs to be done. No one's really done an overview of
Dude, I didn't think you were really
Tom and Jerry and Tex Avery, how
I can totally give you
they
some money.
influenced each other and how it worked. And all
Yeah,
that.
there's only that blurb on the Tex Avery documentary where they sort of kind of mentioned that there was a rivalry between both.
Yeah, and clearly the Tom and Jerry cartoons were influenced by Tex's Arrival. They
Oh,
got
yes,
faster
absolutely.
and snappier. And then someone else, a collector of animation art, suggested a Looney Tunes sketchbook, which would be kind of fun to do, just artwork. There's a lot of great artwork that was done. So right now, nothing's going to get done because I have to get back to living my regular life.
So you actually have to make money in animation to be able to survive? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I need to bank back the money on this book to start with.
I thought artists worked for free.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Hopefully the artists don't publish for free. So yeah, that's where that stands.
So back to your career, what have you been working on the last several years at your studio? What kind of stuff have you been doing?
Well, for a lot of those years, damn little.
Yeah?
I mean, when the economy tanked, it killed animation. It was tough.
Well, tell me about it. Gee, that would be right around the time that I shut my doors.
Yeah, that's about right. You couldn't get arrested. Didn't matter what you did or who you saw, or, I mean, work just would not come in the door. But we stuck it out, drained our savings, stuck it out, and we're still alive. Now we're working on a number of projects. Occasionally a commercial. That used to be our bread and butter. That was 90% of our work. Now we're lucky if it's 1-2%.
So are you doing any CGI or is it all 2D?
We do 2D still.
I hate that term, but you know,
I know.
Just
you
say
know what I
hand-drawn.
mean.
Hand drawn, yeah.
Well, it's not. It
But
includes
see, now it's
other
not-
things.
Now it's not even hand drawn because it's hand drawn
Flash,
on the computer.
vector.
Yeah, so it's on Flash. That's our primary tool now because I still believe in the look of 2D animation. I'm not convinced that CG is the end all for animation. And at the time when people were suggesting we get into CG, everybody else was getting into CG. So why would I
the
want to
reason
follow those
not
guys
to.
over the cliff? And a lot of those people did end up over the cliff. It's unfortunate. I certainly don't take any delight in that, but there was so much competition that the studios could play one operation against another, and they did. And you've seen a lot of big name studios go under. It's not right, but it's happened.
They underbid themselves out of existence.
Yeah, well, that, and then studios would demand retakes and revisions on the same price. You're still carrying your overhead and your labor, but they're still asking for the same price as your initial bid. You can't do business that way. So yeah.
I was really fortunate. You know, my biggest client was Disney when I had my studio. And there was only one Disney project where they demanded the retakes be within that same price. And it was difficult, but we were still able to do it because we had enough of a margin there. But we were pretty fortunate because other studios, you get in that situation where you're just trying to win a project so you can survive, and you never know how difficult the client's going to be.
Yep.
It's a crapshoot.
So, when you said that commercials used to be your bread and butter, what's your bread and butter now then? It's not commercial.
Our bread and butter is anything that comes in the door.
No.
Right now we're finishing a series, interestingly enough, on Tom and Jerry.
Oh,
We had to. It was not an easy show to do. We had to send the work to Canada.
That's the new one that's been on Cartoon Network.
It'll be on starting in April. Yeah.
Oh, it hasn't aired yet. Okay.
It had its challenges because, I mean, first of all, we don't have that kind of budget. I mean, MGM Studios had the highest animation budgets except for Disney.
Yep.
So we didn't have that luxury. We also had to go to 11 minutes instead of 7 minutes, so we were 50% longer.
So instead of doing 3 shorts, we do 2 per show.
Yeah, and it's a bitch to tell a story in that much extra time. We used to just be able to knock the hell out of one another in the 7 minutes. Now you got to put a lot more. You have to basically have 2 stories going in there. And we had to.
they talk?
that's really interesting. That's
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
a lot
really
harder.
interesting challenge. Yeah, because
And then we had the difficulty of sending work out of the country where we set it up and it gets executed elsewhere. And it's a difficult communications issue of getting what you know this can be versus what the budget and schedule will allow. So there's stuff in there that I'm not happy with. That's the norm for anything that you do. But we did the best we could with what we had, and I hope it does well. There's no telling. I hope that we get a second season on it.
Do Tom and Jerry talk?
They do. They themselves do not talk,
Awesome.
which is also a challenge. And it's great. But we also were restricted. We're not allowed to have anybody's heads in the shots.
Awesome.
So
Just like the old school
Yep.
where it's only like the adults from like the waist down.
yeah,
But pantomime
it's
animation is not cheap.
it's not cheap. It's not easy.
Yep.
It's hard to tell a story when you don't have somebody talking.
yeah, it's not a radio show animated. It's actually an animated show.
Yeah, it is. And then you have the difficulty of people having to help tell your story through dialogue. And the only ones that fit in the screen are Spike and Tuffy. The humans don't fit in the screen, so everything has to be staged where they can't bend over to talk to an animal. They're always standing straight up in order to
Yeah.
talk to an animal. There's a lot of frustrating things about staging cartoons that way.
Yeah.
It was not an easy project, but and then we've done a number of pilots for other people. We have a pilot for Amazon right now that can be viewed online, Hard-Boiled Eggheads. We did a pilot for PBS, which has been greenlit, but PBS has this system where you don't, just because they greenlight something doesn't mean you go. You have to go out and find funding for it. So we're in the process of working on that.
So you guys specialize on having that hand-drawn look, or
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are you one of the few studios doing this now? Because everybody else is trying so hard to be.
Now, Darrell, didn't you hear that hand-drawn animation, that look is dead?
I have heard that repeatedly.
okay.
Thank goodness no one believes that.
Make sure you go check out Studio Ghibli's, I never know how to say it. Ghibli's new feature.
Yes. Well,
There's-
there's still a viable market out there, but it's small.
Well, and there's also some really mind-blowing things being done with Flash too that I just became aware of. One of which is a Kickstarter called Wakfu. It's a show that I think it's an anime, but it's gotten really popular in France. And what they want to do now is raise money to, have it dubbed in in English for America, so that they can branch out to North American audiences. They've raised like almost $1 million.
Woohoo!
Yeah. It's,
Nice.
And they think they were asking
Just to get it dubbed?
Yeah. Well, no, but see, the thing is, they weren't asking for that much. They wanted
they
like
only
100 grand
Yeah, they
or
only
something.
wanted something to pay the actors to
Maybe
dub
we
it.
all have that problem.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
only wanted 100 grand, but I'll take the million.
Yeah, everybody's so excited because everybody loves the show, and it's Flash, but it looks insane. Like it looks better than some traditionally drawn cell animation that I've seen.
When Flash gets really good and tricky, it's not cheap anymore.
Oh yeah,
It's still
It's not cheap, but the other thing is Flash is a tool.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
a
It
tool.
doesn't have to be crummy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just if you use it poorly, it will
like
become
the,
crummy.
the stuff that we did in the Larry Boy Cartoon Adventures, we had 3 traditional animators, and then we'd bring in a Flash. And basically, what we did was we took the old Hanna-Barbera production model
Right.
and applied it to applied the Flash tool to it.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were asked. Mucho Lucha called us up and said, "We would love for you to do our shows for us." So I came into the studio. And then they finished the sentence. "We would love to have you do our shows for us for $50,000 for 22 minutes." And I said, "Well, I would love to tell you that there's no way that's ever going to happen."
Yeah, it's not a magic wand. It doesn't
No.
just suddenly make things happen for no money.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I love that is such a common misconception, and yet such a vast one. You're going like, how did this become such a standard idea? You know, that like, oh, because it's digital and it has buttons and it's computerized, that suddenly all the rules go out the window. What?
It will animate itself. Yes, we say that
It'll
the
animate
most
itself.
the most
You
broken
didn't
button.
find
in
that
our-
button, that animate button?
We
in
did.
Flash?
It's broken.
Oh.
We used it so much it broke.
We've been talking about that since the first podcast. We finally find it, and it doesn't work. What a surprise!
Yeah, we overused it.
And by you overused, you mean you used it once.
You pushed it, and the world exploded.
It doesn't matter even how much the machine does. It still requires somebody with some taste and
Do
sensibility.
you mean that
Yep.
you actually have to have a human interface to tell stories?
Absolutely you do.
Are you telling me that,
There's no right
computers
story
can't
button?
computers can't write stories and animate movies and make things that are emotionally
Engaging?
charged and engaging?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Because if we lived in that world, I wouldn't be worrying about animation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Exactly. Step away from the Flash computer.
And we did recently another project we worked on. We're doing a series of Wiener Schnitzel spots for an agency out here in
Oh,
California.
cool.
Cool.
And they're done 2D. They're meant to look like they were done around 1961.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's when the franchise was founded.
And they've been going. The stuff that's on TV now, they've been going for that look, but they're not nailing it because it's so clean, it's so computerized, and I think so. The fact that that's the goal is, I can't wait to see those.
Yeah. So they wanted it to look retro, and I told the agency at the time, this stuff is going to stick out from anything else being advertised on television because nothing else looks like 2D anymore.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that becomes an asset.
Are you guys going to shoot it on film and stuff?
No, it's all being done in Flash.
Okay.
It's still output, but it's all being done with that look, and because it's simple, it stands out.
Heck yeah.
CG is always about the detail.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you don't even know if it's real or
Unless it's tune shaded.
yeah, exactly.
Do you have any idea when those are going to start airing?
Some of them have started, and then we have one that will be airing starting next weekend.
Maybe I've seen one of them then, because I noticed I saw one recently that was it felt very old school. It felt very nice and vintage and.
Yeah, the one that will be airing now is a tiki themed thing. So
Oh, cool.
kind of a tiki lounge.
Oh,
feel
very
to it,
cool.
So yeah, it's fun. They're actually more creative than a lot of the other things we do.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm really excited by this. Is I've noticed a lot of people selling, just collections of commercials.
Yeah.
Online mostly, but elsewhere as well, at like, conventions and things like that. And of course, my personal taste is the '80s. I love the '80s commercials, but they were still all doing them on cells. And then I go back even further to the 60s and the 50s, and you see, even the live action ones had a lot of the time some animation in them.
Yeah.
And it's just such a cool look. And it's almost like those are, because it's like certain people in certain little groups are starting to recognize, if they haven't already, the quality in those and the entertainment value. And it's like, oh, look, just buy this collection and watch all these commercials as entertainment, instead of a movie or instead of a TV show. And I actually get a ton of joy out of those. I bought a few of them, and they're really cool.
They are. They're entertaining, and they're simple. They get the message across very cleanly.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Very cool.
So,
Have you? Has anybody seen the experimentation that they've? I think I want to say it's from Pixar, where they're actually doing that thing where they're actually adding a texture, like a painting
brush
texture,
texture,
and now like a CG character can look flat-ish,
right.
or textured as as a painting, as if they were drawn in pastel.
You mean kind of like what Disney did with Paperman, or are you talking about?
They actually have
It's similar process. It's a similar process.
I know that Paperman was really an expensive process.
Yeah, but even more so. What they're experimenting with is that they take the CG model and then they paint key parts of the model digitally,
they map it on there.
and they map it on there, and then the
Computer
the
interpolates
computer
it.
in betweens it.
Yeah.
And so the effect then looks like whatever texture or effect that you want it to have. So if you want it to look like animated oil paintings, you can.
That's pretty cool, man.
And it's interesting.
So what you're saying is that every animated movie has to cost $150 million.
I don't know what they're going to do with this. They're just experimenting with it, but
Well, it's funny that what computers are trying to do is to emulate what we used to do naturally.
Yeah.
yes,
Exactly.
And it requires a lot more effort, a lot more money, and it takes longer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's actually one of the things that the reason I brought it up is like why do that if that's I guess the question is it cheaper to do that than to retrain people to do it hand drawn?
Well, that's the thing, is like,
it?
Maybe.
it's like I don't think it is. I think you end up spending, what you just said, I think you end up spending more money and more time doing like all of this asset development on the front end, and then you still have to have your movie
Well,
made.
a classically trained animator has training that a modeler needs, that a painter needs, that a designer needs. Where in digital animation, it's it's broken up. You may have a generalist, someone who knows how to do several things, but each of those divisions are much more specialized in
Right.
CG, and I miss, I like both. I've done both. The first project I had was when I was at Warner Brothers, was training the CG animators to think like I thought, like 2D, and that was during development on Iron Giant, and then from there, that's when I went on to Mighty Joe Young after that and worked on Joe, and it was getting people to think the way that traditional artists and animators have been trained, because a lot of digital artists don't know how to draw, so they didn't go out and observe life and look at, observe acting and watch how things move and learn how to design movement, and design action. And a lot of the animators who have done both can sit there and thumbnail their stuff out. And there's some of the fastest digital animators.
Don't you think that nowadays, after all these years, since Mighty Joe Young, now there's been so many CG movies, there are trained animators who think that way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In CG.
Yes, definitely. And I still think that the best of both worlds is if a digital animator is willing is to learn how to draw as well. It just makes their work better.
It's like anything. You have to know how to do it right before you can cheat.
Yeah,
before you can break the
that's a
rules.
good point. Yeah.
So basically, the animator is the ultimate tool because they have
Your layout art.
They've got this education that encompasses all of these things. And lead animators, are basically directors or directors in training.
Well, they can be, certainly.
But in the
a lot of directors in CG were animators first, and that's not to ignore all those other aspects. I mean, you got to think about set design and your layout artists and cinematography and lighting and all those other areas. It takes everybody. I'm just saying that that a traditional animator had a bigger toolbox to work
Just because it would just come right out of your head.
Yeah.
And didn't all the Termite Terrace guys on Looney Tunes, like the directors, didn't they key a lot of their own shorts?
Right.
Like, they set everything up, and then it was like, boom, fill in the gaps. It's all right there, spelled out for you, and that's awesome, because to direct, you got to be able to know everybody's job along the way and be able to do it. Or at least that's the way it used to be, and I think that's what is missing in certain circles now.
I can say this. Darrell thinks about this as well. I personally think when I direct, and I would give this recommendation to anybody who wanted to be a director: know what your own strengths and weaknesses are, and know what everybody else's strengths and weaknesses are to the degree that you can, and let the people who are better than you do their job.
Right.
Why make your job hard for yourself?
Get out of everyone's way.
Get out of their way and let them do their job. They will love you for it, and they will do that much more for you.
Awesome work. You'll get exactly what you want.
Make me look good.
Yes.
Yeah, the two things I hate is if somebody puts more. It's the main thing I hate. Put more work on my desk. I've got a lot to do already, so do a good job. Please do a good job.
Yeah.
I'm happy to let you do a good job, but don't. Anybody who does a lousy job means it comes back to me and means that something else isn't getting done. So.
And when people get paid for doing a good job too, they're a lot happier and a lot more eager to please.
Yeah.
Darrell, I'm a little curious because you brought up something while you were working at Disney that you were vocal about. If you were a vocal animator, you kind of got demoted or whatever it is.
Ask Brad Bird how it worked out for him.
Well, you mean now?
No, back then.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because that's I'm really curious. What is it that you were vocal about? Was it the process? Was it like what was it?
Well, we all had different things. We were all not particularly happy with the stories that were being told.
Is that what it was?
Well, that was part of it. We just kind of stayed. They weren't that interesting. And then we would we would animate on these things. And the animation, we were always told it was too fast, it was too zippy, to slow it down. And it sounds apocryphal, but one of the first scenes, the first scene I did as an animating assistant on Fox and the Hound. I was handed the scene, I went downstairs, thought about it, and animated it. And that afternoon I took it back up to show them. He said, no, you did it too fast. This isn't Disney animation. Go back down there and think about it and do it again.
You mean you actually produced the animation too fast?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
They didn't like that you had been able to do it so quickly and
Right.
have it ready for them the same day.
Right.
Oh my
Right,
gosh.
So I went downstairs and I sat on it for a week and then brought it back up again. and
Didn't
then was
touch
o-
it. You didn't
right.
change a thing.
And then it was okay.
That's awesome.
And it sounds awful to say that and apocryphal, but it's the truth. I mean, that's the kind of mindset that was going on at the time, that Disney animation had to be carved out. It was a slow, laborious process. And of course, if you think that way, of course it will be.
I have to say, I do still think that animating in general is a slow, laborious process.
It is, but those people
But it was
of
even
all
slower and more laborious in those days.
It was deliberately.
At the time, just to give you an idea, I still have they would send out weekly footage sheets to kind of goad people and to let everybody know where they stood on the footage chart. And the highest footage at the time was somewhere around 7 to 10 feet a week. Now, that's not very much footage.
No.
Warner Brothers was doing 25 in its heyday. So 7 to 10 feet
I
a week.
remember Ray told me they were doing 20 feet a week on Tom and
Tom and
Jerry.
Jerry, yeah. And if it's laid out properly, that's not impossible to do
Right.
if you got good character layouts.
And of course, they were animating Bambi. You know,
Right.
it's depending on how complex the anatomy of the character and all that is.
Yeah. But at the time, 7 feet, 10 feet was considered a very high footage person. And at one point, while I was animating as an assistant, I got up to 7 feet. And in theory, I would have been the highest ranked animator for that week or two or something like that. But to show you how the system worked, Cliff Nordberg, who was a classic Disney animator, had unfortunately died during the production of Fox and the Hound, and he was kept on the list as the top footage animator, even though he was no longer animating. It was just a way to keep us down lower.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was just to keep. I just
Wow.
And of course, his footage wasn't going to go down because he didn't have weeks accruing against it. Now it was just there. That's stopped when he stopped. It was that kind of thinking there that it just felt like everything was designed to keep.
Were there
keep
a
us
lot
down.
of discontent artists trying to break the system as it was, or
Well, I'm sure you've heard that Don Bluth referred to the D-Wing as the rat's nest. And that's where Brad Bird, Henry Selick, John Musker, Jerry Reese, there's a lot of discontent. That's where that started, was in there.
I see.
So all of those guys were together at the time.
Yeah, they were in Milt Call's old room at D-Wing.
And all of them felt the same way. They were all unhappy. Okay.
See, Dale got smart and he'd already left.
Yeah. Also at the time, Don called it that because they were rebelling against his way of doing things. And he also had his emphasis seemed to be more on the motion than the acting. He was more interested in how smooth you could get the motion.
Well, it's not like he would shoot live action reference to do a Mickey Mouse cartoon. Yes, he would. So anyway.
So there was a lot of rancor there between people who came out of CalArts and Don Bluth, and of course Don Bluth ended up leaving. And then we were dealing with people who had kind of been on the bench for many years, and now were suddenly directing on The Fox and the Hound. And they were pretty much dipped into the system there, and so they were going to do things the way they always knew them to be.
What was
so doing things faster or more innovatively was not part of that picture.
What was the last project you worked for when you were there at Disney?
The last one, what do you mean? How do you define that? I mean, I worked.
That was Scene.
The last feature, I think.
The last feature would have
no,
been
I said
Fox and
project.
Hound.
It could be.
I never touched Black Hall.
No.
I did everything I could to avoid that.
Yeah.
It smelled bad from the beginning.
Really?
And the
I don't know if
sad
you've
thing
seen
is
any of-
that
I've
could
never-
have been a breakout movie for Disney if they would have.
Well, have you seen Tim Burton's drawings for it?
I probably have a long
He did
time
4x8.
ago.
He did tons of 4x8 boards of just putting up concepts, and they are out there.
Yeah.
And it was so far out there that it just fried some minds, and it never happened. I have some of those drawings still because I thought they were so amazing.
I mean, think
And
about
I knew
it.
they would never do anything with them.
Right,
Think of-
right.
the Disney today tackling that kind of a project, I think would be very, 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 very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely
Well, of course. I mean,
But now it becomes more obvious. Okay, Tim is a proven success.
Right.
Brad is a proven success.
Right.
All of that suddenly changes the calculus. But at the time, They were just as talented when they were there.
Sure. And I would love, I'm sure all of us would love to see some of those Burton drawings from that. You have those,
I
you
have some
said?
of them, yeah.
Are they, I mean, you have some of the far out crazy ones that you're talking about?
Wow.
Okay, we got to see those, man. Because you've
Maybe there's
opened
another
Pandora's box.
Forgotten animation.
Yes.
That's great. Because I knew he worked on, that was one of his first, films at Disney, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
What?
He was an assistant on Fox and the Hound, and they put him up there to develop that stuff, and it was just too far out.
What are some of your biggest influences? What influenced you as you got into the business?
Anything that was funny, and that included
Live action and animation, both. I mean,
well, the Jay Ward stuff was certainly a big influence, and the Looney Tunes, and Tom and Jerry. At the time, I wasn't even aware of who Tex Avery was when I got into the business. But boy, could that guy time and cut a film.
talk about zippy animation.
Yeah.
Man, what was great about him is he was always looking to see how little he could get away with. And I don't mean that in a labor method. I mean that if I can cut this many frames out and make it funnier, then by all means do it.
It was constant experimentation on timing.
Yeah, and they would just get it so you only get out what you absolutely needed, and it's fascinating to look back on that stuff. There's something to be said for that.
And that's why everything's so funny and moves so wacky. You know, like that's great. It wasn't more, it was actually less.
Yeah.
And I love the ones where, he's panning and then it's just a background. For like 30 or 40 seconds, it's just a background of like, so there's one painting we get to go over and there's gags in there. It's great.
Exactly right. So he had a way of doing things that was very influential once I realized what that was all about. Live action movies, I think we've all been influenced by live action movies. I don't know how they would actually translate to cartoons, but films like the first two Godfathers were really strong influences. Chinatown, I kind of go for noirish kind of stuff on that things, but comedies too. I always liked. I know it's a guilty pleasure, but I like the Three Stooges.
Cool.
There, I said it.
Oh man,
Hey, those are great,
I'm a Laurel and Hardy person.
Oh, Hardy. Marx Brothers.
I find
Marx Brothers, yes.
exceeding. I'm guessing there's plenty I haven't seen out there, but I find it exceedingly difficult to find black and white media that's not entertaining. Like there's always something in there that catches you or really taps into something where you just go like, this is really well done. Even if I'm not digging on the story or maybe all the characters, like there's something
Have you
really
ever seen
appealing.
Dr. Caligari's Cabinet?
No.
That's really amazing to look
That's
at.
freaking wild.
Cool.
Let's just put it this way. He highly influenced Tim Burton, there's no doubt about it.
Okay. Cool.
Influenced a lot of people. That is an
Tim Burton
amazing
flat
fact.
out just took that and ran with it. Look at something like Vincent and look at Dr. Caligari's Cabinet and you'll be like, oh, I see where you got it.
Cool.
Awesome.
Anyway.
If you were to recommend a new animator coming into the industry, something to study, what would you recommend?
Study, you mean like
As far as animation, as far as film, or as a director, or somebody to be looking at to really be.
I still recommend that everybody that comes into the business learn how to draw. I know that sounds stupid for everything that's being done by machine, but my attitude is if you know how the anatomy works, you know how to be able to cheat it, how to break it. A lot of people are hampered by the rigs that they're handed. If you know how to draw, you know how to cheat that stuff. And I think those kind of people would actually be very good at rigging because they could know what you can get away with and how to make it work, make it believable. So I still maintain drawing is one of the most important things you can do. And I think if you want to ultimately direct, you should have a good cinematic sense of both cartoons and live action.
That means watch a lot of movies.
Yeah, watch a lot. I do. I mean it. I brought my kids up on watching a lot of movies, classic ones, because I want them to have a broader language rather than the last superhero movie that came out.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be part of your retirement plan too, right?
What's that?
Put them to work.
I don't think they're going into this business.
You know what?
Too smart for that.
You know what's blowing my mind is that my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, she requests Buster Keaton movies from Netflix.
Really? Good for her.
I watched. We put in young Sherlock Holmes. I turned it on and said, let's watch this. And she loved it. She's like, more. more, give me more. And then we just started watching Buster Keaton movies, and now she's just like, can we watch more of that guy?
It doesn't talk.
Yeah,
The
she
great thing
loves them.
about that for
Loves
kids is
them.
they don't have to be in on the sophisticated verbal back and forth. They don't have to know all these different ideas. It's just pantomime.
Yeah, and it's
Just
clear, and the emotions are clear, and it's funny, and she laughs, and it's like, it's just so brilliant, you know. And I'm watching these things, and I'm like, that's so good. And I mean, that was the influence of all the animators back then
Yeah,
too.
Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton. And what I like about Keaton is he's just deadpan.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
gags come off way funnier when he doesn't react. It's just something amazing about that.
Yeah, cool.
Good times.
Any other thoughts?
Just thank you so much for doing this and sharing all these
thank you.
stories.
Yeah,
with us, Darrell.
let's repeat the name of the book and the website where you can get it.
The name of the book is The Art of J. Ward Productions. The website is artofjward.com. And you can get both the J. Ward book and the limited edition Magoo book at that website.
Excellent.
Excellent. And
Awesome.
we're going to have links to all to that site, and the book over at thecornerbooth.net, where you could get the show notes
Excellent.
for this show, and which was brought to us by.
Well, yes, and I wanted to just mention too that this whole self-plugging thing was not my idea. We're gonna start before I start getting hate mail here. We're gonna start just to let you guys in at the beginning and end of every episode. One of the 3 Corner Booth founders is going to share whatever their big project is with everyone, so that it's one thing we can check it out. So I got lucky to be the first one to do that, and it's chanceraspberry.com, where the main project is Little Billy, and you can go specifically to littlebilly.com and check that out. It's the first cartoon ever about special needs and neurological conditions and things like that. So, which I've learned now makes up about 50% of the United States society.
And maybe 100% of animators.
Yeah, exactly. Amen. Amen. So thank you guys so much for listening, as always, and please join us next time for another Corner Booth.
The Corner Booth. I thought it was the Corner Booth.
Okay.
And besides, can I say one thing before we actually sign off here?
Yeah, we'll
Thank
just
you,
end it.
Darrell.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Darrell. We appreciate it.
so much.
And thank you for joining us at
The Corner Booth.